Our final presenter for today is Brendan Griffiths. Brendan Griffiths is one of my many brilliant colleagues here. He's been here for 10 years, also is the inaugural director for the MPS program here, and also is on leave. So this is like the most virtual faculty interaction forever. So I just want to make another note too, that it is, in many ways I was inspired to be able to do this because of Brendan. Brendan has always been the backbone of our symposia here. And so thank you, Brendan, for that inspiration. I thought that maybe for once he could be the person who's talking instead of the one that's behind the camera. So for that, I'm quite grateful and excited to hear from him. So I'm going to stop sharing so that you can share, Brendan, and there you are.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, Juliet, thank you so much for the intro. That's very kind of you. And first, just thank you so much for having me and for inviting me to participate. Yeah, I'm not typically on this side of things aside from being in the classroom, but and thanks to all my fellow presenters. It's really an honor to kind of stand here with you virtually, and hello to everybody who's in the room. I don't know how many people are there, but I can feel you, through the webcam. The webcam looks good, by the way. So really sad I can't be there in person. I was hoping I could come out, and I do. Yeah, I miss it. I miss Parsons. I miss being in the city. I'm currently in Portland, Oregon, where I grew up, and anyway, it's great to be back. So for those who don't know me, my name is Brendan, and I am on the communication design faculty here, and I've been teaching at Parsons, as Juliet mentioned, for a little over 10 years now, which is pretty crazy to think about, and in a variety of contexts, both undergraduate and graduate. And today I put this together mostly to talk about my experience developing and also running a master's program here, focused on interaction design and digital products. And it was a program that I developed and ran for 4 years, from 2017 until 2021 when I stepped down. And that program, some of you may know, it's referred to as the Master Professional Studies in Communication Design, again, part of the larger CD umbrella that we have here, kind of known colloquially as MPS CD. And I saw, Juliet, you added this title, How to Teach Internets, to my talk, which I realized is actually a perfect kind of summation of, I guess, like what I've been trying to do for these last 10 years. And also somehow made a lot of sense to pair with this first slide, this image that I have here, which I started the deck with, but then can't really remember why I had included it, but it does sort of make sense somehow. Certainly feels like an image that is of the internet. Before we kind of talk about, like MPS CD stuff, though, I wanted to give everyone a little bit of additional context on my own background and like my own design education, since that's the focus of the symposium. And really that's an education in a lot of ways that began when I was a child, just kind of coincidentally. Like I happened to have a neighbor growing up who was a sort of graphic designer, game designer, tinkerer kind of person, and he gave me like pirated copies of early design software like Macromedia Director and HyperCard, Photoshop, and so like from a very early age, and my grandmother had sort of gifted me a like an early Macintosh, a Mac Plus, I think, or maybe it was a Mac SE or something that I had, from when I was like 6 or 7 years old, and from that very early age, I was like experimenting with these kind of, professional tools and making stuff like on the early web. This is like in the mid to late 90s, and so I had that kind of like history, again from a pretty young age. But my formal design education really began in my undergraduate program at the University of Oregon, where I studied, and where I was taking classes in what was then called the Multimedia Design Program. This is a program that existed for maybe like 2 years there. I found this screen grab on archive.org of their website, which dates to the time that I was there. This is like early 2000s. And as I was kind of putting this together, I realized that like in some ways, like this weird little major that's housed inside of this it housed inside of an art and architecture department. Was kind of like a proto MPSCD in some ways, just in terms of how it was probably conceived. Like you can imagine some dean, hearing about this new thing called the World Wide Web, and then like tasking their faculty with like figuring out how to teach to it and market it. Anyway, the program itself is like a real kind of hodgepodge of classes. Like you could take anything from silk screening to video game design, but I really ended up connecting with a couple of fantastic faculty who really taught me like typography, like really at a core level, via letterpress. So really learning, setting lead type, and about visual design and image making, and sort of like giving me context in a way and a framework for a lot of the technical skills that I had sort of been developing on my own. And yeah, got to throw this in there. After undergrad, I moved to New York, and I like worked in a couple of design studios, and for some time, for like 3 or 4 years, actually, I was the kind of in-house designer for the Arts Presenter Creative Time. And after a while, I kind of decided I wanted to go to graduate school, so went to Yale and studied graphic design some more. And we clearly all know the history of that place. But again, my experience there was kind of that I was able to connect with really amazing faculty and students that kind of put me on a trajectory and into a network, or like a social graph that is part of a lineage that like really brings me through to today, actually. And that's kind of where I'm going to go with the program. A few more slides about me. After grad school, I came back to New York, and I did the usual like post-grad thing of like, starting a design studio. This is a photo actually of me and my design partner, Frank DeRose, playing Guitar Hero in 2007, which is actually 4 years before we would go on to found a studio together. And we did the typical like small studio thing, spending like 6 months designing a website for $2,500, and just like really unsustainable. Yeah, I like it was around the same time that I also started teaching at Parsons, both as like a way to sustain like my design practice, but also really as like a way to participate again in this lineage, and like to work with other faculty that I felt were kind of philosophically aligned with my own interests in design. And so I started teaching interaction design to undergraduate students here at Parsons. And I was working from both like this conceptual and formal perspective that I had developed while I was at Yale, but also this kind of technical perspective that I'd always had an interest in, and trying to kind of investigate the history of the internet and computer networks and the like. And I had students that were making work like this in my classes. This is like some work from close to 10 years ago now. And we would be reading, for example, like Alexander Galloway's Protocol, which is kind of great history of like early internet stuff, and at the same time using like these core web technologies to for example, to design a typeface. This is a project by a student named Andreas Kuhnen called NetFont. Or I'd give them, briefs which asked them to design and develop a website that would use chance as a means of generating content and form. So, sort of trying to articulate a rule set that might determine how content is constructed, and considering how that form might evolve over time. Making use of different event states, like mouse movement or scrolling, and again, like really, like for me, like had continued this long-standing interest in like investigating the materiality of digital artifacts through the understanding of code. So like, again, asking students to really build these themselves, and we would teach front-end programming languages like HTML and CSS and JavaScript, and we still do. This project, by the way, is by Clarissa Ong. It's called An Ordinary World. Anyway, so yeah, I was teaching these kind of like formalist, like code is material kind of courses for a few years. And then an opportunity came along to sort of join the full-time faculty here and to help develop this new program, this Master of Professional Studies program that focused specifically on user experience and user interface design. And I should note that, like a lot of the contours of what this program you know, was going to be, and, you know, was kind of already sketched out when I had arrived. Some by my colleagues, and a lot also by the institution itself. Like there was a kind of mandate to make this thing, this idea of this kind of, you know, short form masters. And so, yeah, like any good design project, though, I think, you know, developing it was kind of like a lot about understanding what the constraints were and how we could kind of creatively move within them to like accomplish our own, like, you know, goals as a faculty. So yeah, when you're developing a program like this, you end up looking at a lot of charts, maybe like the one you see here, like kind of ridiculous, or here, even more ridiculous, just trying to make sense of where and how to situate yourself in this like really chaotic assemblage of terms. And I think like really like, you know, most of the way that these sorts of courses, like the way that they're taught and the way that they're framed in the academy is usually through the lens of engineering, like, you know, human computer interaction type programs, or even just like, you know, like UX programs that exist inside of computer science majors. That's absolutely a thing. Or through a framework which is basically borrowed from like physical product design and design thinking. So like, you know, think like Don Norman and IDEO and these kinds of folks, and a lot of schools have kind of followed that. So, you know, when I was writing the curriculum, I really wanted to approach this from this other lineage that I was kind of familiar with, like from a graphic and communication design perspective, and really tried to root the program in, you know, typography and visual form, but giving students this orientation, like the vocabulary that they would need to participate in this professional world of like being a user experience designer, being a digital product designer and a team. And so, yeah, so I spent like a year kind of like writing the curriculum and shepherding it through the accreditation process in collaboration with a lot of folks at the school. Again, this is really mostly not my work even. And we, yeah, we, as mentioned earlier, I think we launched the program in 2017 and brought in like an initial cohort of 12 students. And what you're seeing here is a kind of like marketing website that we made to showcase the work from the program, and also to give some additional context for folks who are applying and who were just kind of interested in what was going on here. This is like beyond what was given in the school's marketing site, which is written in like a very specific language. So like in a nutshell, to describe the program, it's a 1 year, not even 1 year, it's a 9-month accelerated master's program that's targeted towards students who already have really strong graphic design skills and who want to come and learn the methods and the processes that are commonly deployed in like UX or you know, digital product contexts. And the students came and they started making stuff, and you know, stuff that looks like this. This is a project called Power Up by Husani Barnwell. And you know, like, yeah, you can see like early on we really leaned into this like, you know, like digital product design process, like following I'd say a fairly well rehearsed playbook that, you know, around product development, you know, ideation, prototyping, and you know, feedback-based iterative working method. And the students, you know, again, like I think took to this pretty well. Like, I mean, this work is really, to me, like I was like, wow, this is great. It's working right away. You know, like they were able to apply that kind of graphic design sensibility to this process and understood how to kind of like, you know, translate, relay information. And again, was just for them about shifting that context into something digital. But beyond that curriculum and coursework, I think the thing that really we started to develop was like a community and an ethos around making this kind of work. And I should also say that like this too, like this mostly comes from the students themselves in a lot of ways, but really like trying to develop a way of working and creating things for screens that feels like specific to the program itself. And again, I think like a lot of that was developed from a student perspective, and I think a lot of it also comes though from the orientation again of this lineage, the kind of provenance of the students as graphic designers, bringing a lot that I think felt unique to this particular context. Yeah, so just, and also just like these are images of I think our first and second cohort that you're seeing here. And so like, yeah, my goal with the program, like initially was like, you know, not to build, you know, interaction designers or like UX designers, UI designers, product designers, but really to kind of like have a program that produces just designers. I think like this, all of this titling stuff is really ridiculous. But that have a versatile enough skill set and have, again, that kind of language and context to be able to engage with, whatever platform or media makes sense. In this case, really focusing it on specifically that kind of UX and UI world. And the images that you're seeing here, by the way, are by student Nikhil Misra from our class of 2018, I believe it was. Yeah, so anyway, I think all this kind of like the work itself aside is really, all of this was trying to build to this kind of community and try to build a lineage around what it means to study this kind of design process, to provide, again, them with a framework to kind of build that ethos around this particular moment in time. And again, a lot of this was student led. Like these last couple images, like this is actually from a student led workshop. That's actually a former undergraduate student, Taya Cotton, who's helping to lead the workshop. This is developed by students in the program. And I think one of the ways that we as faculty tried to augment this was to use the program as a kind of platform for auxiliary projects and events. Juliet mentioned, like the Symposium platform that we, launched around the same time and was really, open to everybody in the school. But we also would host like student-led clubs, hackathons, like design jam type events that serve folks in the CD community and beyond. And also like would sponsor, student-led publications. This is one called Screen that showcased a range of different contemporary practices in the field of digital design, had this kind of like algorithmically generated screensaver cover, which was kind of cool. Each issue has like interviews and sketches and mock-ups and ideas and reflections around a central theme. Yeah, and so I guess like the thing that's exciting to me is that now with a little bit of distance, like this has been like 6 years almost now since we initially wrote this program. We're actually, we are starting to kind of see, I think like a real community develop. We're starting to see a real ethos develop. We're starting to see people like, there's a kind of like recursive nature to the way that students go out into the world and kind of collect other students for us and bring people back into the program, which has been really exciting. Yeah, and I think, wanted to show this slide, like, this comes from our March 2020 graduates. Like, I think the last 2 years, I guess I'd say, like, really tested the resilience of every community, obviously, but especially education communities. But I think our students specifically responded with like a lot of bravery and conviction. And, one of our students developed this virtual graduation platform that was really exciting. And, again, like having now graduated 5 cohorts of students, I think 120 in total, it's really, really exciting to see this community kind of, and this kind of ethos or this way of approaching the work, pick up steam and develop into something that people can kind of point to and say like, oh, that's, that's a result of that specific program. And like in the last 2 years, I think we've also seen an explosion in the way that just like people learn skills. Like if you're on Twitter, you've probably seen this British guy. But I think ultimately you can't just put everything on the internet. Like you can't really build a community through TikTok tutorials. And it's very hard to build an ethos around something without boots on the ground, without a kind of human connection that is present and physical. And I say that even as someone who's joining you remotely. Yeah, so I guess I would say, like, to try to wrap this up a little bit, I would say that, like the design, as the design discipline and the design industry, I would say, is like becoming increasingly commodified and automated. I think it's this lineage, like this ethos really, and like the social graph in a lot of ways also, that will really only increase in value as time goes on. So I'm actually really hopeful for the future of these kinds of short form programs that bring people together, to form, new groups of designers to write their own histories and to kind of carve out space for this particular perspective. I think especially a perspective that's like kind of really needed in an industry that's oftentimes, skewed by folks from engineering or from other kinds of disciplines. And I think, I'm kind of excited to see now that I've stepped away for the last year where it's gonna net out for everybody, as we return to in-person learning, as we return to physical community, what that ethos is going to look like and how it's going to transform. That was a little brief, but I'm going to end there. And so thank you for having me. And actually, really excited to chat with everybody. I really enjoyed everyone's presentation today. So thanks so much.